Good evening, everybody. We want to just wait a couple minutes for everybody to load on here because it takes just a minute or two for everybody to get on the Zoom. We had quite a few people in the waiting room. So when the numbers slow down, we'll get started. I am super excited about tonight's webinar. We're going to be pretty quick tonight, probably about a half an hour, and then we'll do some Q&A. But I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. Like I said, I'm super excited about this one. So if you've been, following us for a while, we cover a lot of different things in derm, but this is one of the topics that keeps coming up over and over again in the community, and our Club Derm community, is entrepreneurship, like the business side of derm, what it really looks like being a clinician and also be an entrepreneur. So navigating these industry relationships and building something like beyond, your basic clinical practice. So we basically heard you, and we put together this wonderful group of dermatologists that work in all different areas of entrepreneurship. We have Dr. Farberg, who is going to be our host, and Dr. Leo, who I think everybody knows because we've had him on many of our webinars over the years. Dr. Dawkins and Dr. Waldman. This is our first, session on entrepreneurship. We're going to hopefully make this a series and first of many. Tonight's conversation is going to be very casual, a little bit different than what we normally do. We normally walk you, through a PowerPoint slide and the data. So we are going to be, like I said, feel free to put all your questions in the Q&A like normal. And just really quick, I just want to say one thing is really just, like I said, put everything into the Q&A, and we'll try to get through everybody's questions. If we cannot, we will make sure somebody answers your questions at a later date. If you want a particular dermatologist one of our panelists to answer that, just put that in the notes as well. Thank you. Dr. Farberg, you want to get started?
Take it away. Let's get going. It's 7:07 in Central Dallas time. And oh my gosh, look at this. I'm surrounded by some of the latest and greatest. The reality is any one of these entrepreneurs, amazing business people, could probably take the entire hour and not even get through a fraction of what they've done, and not even close to telling you about what they're planning to do in the future. So my job here is to wrangle all these cats, herd them all, and try to get through as much content as possible to help them tell their story. Real quick about me, Aaron Farberg. I'm in Dallas, Texas. My background, let's talk about entrepreneurship. It's also in clinical practice. In the last 3 years, I've opened 10 offices, no private equity. Not that there's anything bad or wrong with that. It's just, what I chose to do with private practice. Also have my own residency program, and also two very large clinical trials units. And on the business side of things, besides running those clinics, there's been a number of companies that I've been involved with, one of which everyone kind of knows, Castle Biosciences. More than 10 years ago, I was one of their original investors, helped them go public, and have since designed many of their tests, including their most recent one, which I got on the cover of Derm Times for, their atopic derm test. We'll be picking Dr. Leo's brain on that. But that doesn't just happen overnight. That takes time. It actually started many years ago, as I tell you my entrepreneurial story, where I looked at their data and they had two papers out. And I actually bought SPSS for $100 and ran some statistics and said, hey, look, I think if we adjusted this test, it could be very valuable. And since then, it's just sort of grown and grown and grown into now I'm on the board of a large collagen company that we're bringing also public. And so, again, these things don't happen overnight. If I were to give you one giant tip, because I'm going to lead with that, is be patient. Everything does take time. That's my entrepreneurial story. You're not here to hear me talk. Just a reminder, everyone put your questions and answer questions. We'll get you the answers in the chat. so that Kim can make sure we get all those questions. She's going to shoot them to me. Please, please, please. We're only going to be having them chat about themselves for the first little while, and then we're going to be answering your questions. But without further ado, we have some amazing people, Manju, Reed, and Peter. We want to hear their story. And the first thing, I'm going to go around and have you each introduce. You'll have a few minutes each because I really want you to tell a brief story of your entrepreneurial story thus far and where you think you're going to take it from here. Um, I think Dr. Dawkins, you're over here on my upper left, so you're going to take the lead. Ladies first, please tell us a little bit about Thimble, your background, all the goodies.
Awesome. Well, yes, Manju Dawkins. So I'm based in Los Angeles and I'm from the East Coast, did all my training and everything in New York City. And so I started a company called Thimble, and it's a platform of products to alleviate the pain and stress of all needle procedures. So the whole idea is it's an over-the-counter platform to alleviate the pain of the injection itself and also the soreness, bruising that occurs afterwards. And we also want to tackle the psychological side. So we have an app that puts together all the research-backed tools to do that. And so our intention is to really change the standard of care for needle procedures. So I know it's a real deterrent. About 60% of the world's population has some level of needle fear, and it's time to start talking about it and do something about it. And so, yeah, that's what our goal is.
When did this all start in your sort of, life pathway and how far along are you at the company? Like how many billions of dollars of sales have you done yet?
Almost there. But yeah, well, I would say patience has been quite the virtue because it's been a long, long journey. But actually, how it started, I hated needles as a kid, of course. But then once you have your own kid, I was actually a third year derm resident when I had my first daughter, taking her in for that first shot and that face. I mean, you know that face. And it's just like one of like, how could you let that happen? Like you betrayed me. And I was like, oh my God, I did. So that was when I realized, like, what are we doing? And luckily, my co-residents would write me for some EMLA and, did the whole contraption thing. I knew how to use it. It was easy enough for me. And it was a total game changer. And I thought, why are we not doing this for everyone for medical procedures? And so, anyways, that was the impetus. And it's been many, many years of research and development and just so many steps. And we don't have 3 hours. So, but we are out in market. The Prepare Patch is FDA listed. We are for sale e-commerce, thimblehealth.com, and we're working on the B2B side. We're sold in some of your offices already, so we're excited about that. And again, since our goal is to change the standard of care, we really are looking for enterprise to adopt us so that it's given to our patients rather than patients having to buy it for themselves.
I love it. We're always happy to support you, and you definitely follow through with one of my well-known facts of life. If you ever want something done, just find a mother who's already overly busy, and she'll start a whole company and be super successful while she's finishing residency. Why not? Okay. Dr. Waldman, Reed, I mean, that's tough to follow, but I know you've been very busy, and why not start a whole pharmaceutical company while you're at it? Please tell us about where you came from and where you're going.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. My name is Reed Waldman. I'm co-founder and CEO of Veradermics. Veradermics, as some of you may know, is an aesthetics and dermatology focused pharmaceutical company, initially aiming to disrupt the 80 million person pattern hair loss market. And we're doing that through the development of VDPHL01, which is the first minoxidil extended release tablet. And the premise is very straightforward. I would imagine most people on the call have written a prescription for oral minoxidil. I certainly have. But fundamentally, when you look at the pharmacology of the drug, right, it is designed and it performs just like a blood pressure medication. What I mean by that is when you take it, it spikes quickly in the plasma. Within 2 hours, the majority is gone. Within 4 hours, almost all of it's gone. And those spikes drive the cardiac effects of the drug, and they don't really drive hair growth, and they don't provide that consistent and durable exposure at the follicle. So we set out with the mindset that we could optimize minoxidil for oral administration, maximization of hair growth, minimization of cardiac risk by developing an extended release tablet that provides consistent and durable exposure of the drug above the levels at which it grows hair, staying below those that it has cardiac effects. We're now late into phase 3 trials. We have two ongoing in males that are fully enrolled, one in females that is enrolling. And I think, Aaron, as you know, we took the company public on the New York Stock Exchange in February, and we've been very excited to have the most successful IPO in biotech since 2020. So it's been a very, very, very good time at NYSE, MANE. But thank you for having me.
That's been wonderful. Well, look, you can't stop there. You got to give us a little more insight into that. How did you even identify that problem? I mean, like, are you a bio, chemist? Are you a pharmacologist? Like, I mean, where did this idea even like come to your front door?
No, and I have no marketable pharmaceutical skills prior to starting the company. Like all of you, I was a dermatologist, and this really ended up beginning as kind of a labor of love during COVID that my co-founder, who's also a dermatologist, and I had very little to do and really started playing around in the pharmaceutical space. And then one thing led to another, and we just kept doing things and kept doing things. We raised a little money, then we raised a lot of money, and then all of a sudden, you kind of got to advance the idea, and that's how we ended up where we are today.
Very cool. Gosh, well, that's an awesome story, and I know we're going to be following you for many years to come. And as I scroll through Instagram, I'll see some ads already for some of the studies you're doing, and I love seeing that, and I click like every time. So, all right, now, Kim has mentioned him before. He's also a personal favorite, and not because he's so darn good looking, but because tonight I decided. I'm gonna have a little Lou Malnati's pizza, and we share a love for pizza together. But that's not all. He's also a ever repeat, reiterative entrepreneurial star. Dr. Leo, please. I mean, we only have so much time here, but please tell us about what you've been up to and where you're headed.
Well, thank you. I feel like, our first two folks here, all three of you guys have achieved greatness. You guys have gone out and done it. I feel like entrepreneurship was thrust upon me a little bit more. I was kind of minding my own business in the clinical space, focused on atopic dermatitis, and it was really kind of blind luck. People came to me and said, "Hey, would you be an advisor for this? Hey, can you give us some money for this company? All right, you're a friend. Okay, I'll do some advising. Well, I do know a little bit about this. Let me help." And I got really lucky that some of those things did well. And of course, some didn't. Some things fall apart, but it's been an incredible ride. And little by little, I felt like this is what I want to do more of. I love thinking about this. I love helping people with great ideas. I always view myself, I'm Master Yoda. I'm not Luke Skywalker. I don't want to be the star of the show. You guys are bold. You're going to do it. I want to be behind you, though, cheering, supporting, giving wisdom, helping out. That's the best, right? And I've really been able to build that up. And we got to really bring it to life with Skin Angels. So a couple of years ago, we came together. This is a group of us, and Manju's actually part of this group as well. Ross Perlman, Budong, Ross Levy, and I put this together where we have a group of derms who now can actively recruit other dermatologists who are interested in business, interested in this kind of work, and companies come to us and they present their ideas. So it's like a Shark Tank for dermatology. And it's been absolutely incredible. I feel like I get to go on a number of these wild rides with different companies, and that has really made all the difference.
So give us an example of what Skin Angels is doing now. You've teased us enough. What's one of the projects that you're most interested in or that you recently engaged in? Because I got lots of friends that ask me for money too, but I don't know if I write them checks yet. So
Well, we'd love
help
to
us
have
out
you
there.
part of the group and then send them to the group. It costs nothing to present for companies. So we get a lot of different companies send their decks our way, and then we try to pick the ones we think have the best chance of it being exciting and interesting to the members. We do have what I call the billionaire problem. The real Shark Tank guys are billionaires, so they can write checks all day long. Most of us are real working terms, so we can't write infinite checks. But some companies will say, you know what, we don't necessarily need your money, but we'll take you as an advisor and we'll give you some equity, which is really cool too. That's another fun way we can parlay our time and our skills for that. And a big part of what we do is networking. But I will say that one of my favorite companies is right here tonight. So Thimble is a company that I'm an advisor for and an investor in. And I'm so proud of all the stuff that Dr. Dawkins has done. I've been there from the very early parts. One of the first groups that she presented to was our very own. Of course, I'm part of another interesting startup that's in Cambridge, Mass, that I'm really excited about, who's working on a new topical probiotic spray. So they're doing some really cool work there. They're called Concerto Biosciences. We've had some wonderful presentation recently, a company that's working on fragrances. They are going to use AI and very advanced chemistry to develop fragrances and flavorings. They're called Patina, and they're such an interesting company. I love what they're doing And I just think it has potential to do non-allergenic fragrances. So many of my patients can't use, everything has to be fragrance free, but then they live a life where they can never use anything like this. So imagine a whole new approach of doing this where you can bring it to those people. And then I'll tell you one last one that presented not too long ago that I'm very excited about. It's called Calm Therapeutics, and they actually make these beautiful, soft, supple patches for eczema and wounds. And they're almost like a hydrocolloid gel, but they're also impregnated with a very soothing botanical. So they can be used to these areas that are causing discomfort. And it's just been so cool to hear the vision of each founder, their journey, what kind of problems they face. And then my favorite is to cross-pollinate, to say, wait, you need this? I got a person who's working on the exact problem. And then I say, you guys meet. And then when they get together, it's unbelievable.
It's amazing when you bring all the right people together. All right, so now that you guys have all learned a little bit about the three wonderful minds in front of you here, don't forget to put your questions into the chat for Kim to put all together so that we can make sure that we're answering all your questions. But now, kind of a round robin, anyone can jump in on any of these questions. I might introduce or send them to one or another. If you have something to say, great. If not, you can wait until the next good question. But one thing that I think is important is balance in life. And so obviously you went to medical school, you went to residency. That's what you're trained to do. You're trained to be a doctor here. So you've got a clinical practice, and I'd love to hear about how you started with your clinical practice and then married in with your business or entrepreneurial or all the other things, how easy it was to balance, what sort of advice you have on that. And I mean, maybe you're not even practicing now. I mean, how do you do this all? So who wants to start? Maybe Reed. I mean, you started a whole pharmaceutical company while everyone else was sitting there, using the Peloton during COVID. Make us all feel a little, ashamed of ourselves here.
So I did practice for a long time, and actually in December I stopped in private practice finally, as we knew we were taking the company public, and I kept canceling clinics. And there comes a point at which you've canceled enough clinics that the patients are starting to revolt, and that's when it's time to call it quits. And so that's what I saw. But yeah, so for the first 6 years, 6.5 years of Veridermics, I was in clinical practice, and I think my real comment here would be to challenge the premise, which is balance. I think if you are going to go at this and you want to do this, you have to be deeply, deeply obsessive, right? Doing anything, no matter how good the idea is extremely, extremely, extremely challenging. And that you have to be all in. And I think I saw over time my focus change from being in clinical practice to really running the company. And it became, yeah, obsessive. I think about it when I woke up. I think about it when I go to bed. And while I go on vacation, I don't know that I've taken a day off in years. So I think for you to go on to this journey, you have to want this to be something, and you don't know this initially, but over time, as it really becomes something, you have to want it to be everything. Like I would imagine, Aaron, when you're opening a new practice, you're not thinking, oh man, I'm working, or I can't believe it's 7 p.m. and I'm still trying to contract with insurance. You are like living that, you're enjoying that. It is your Super Bowl, and that has to be as it is, or else you won't make it.
It's not work. It literally is your life. And I think that's one of the secrets of entrepreneurship is none of it feels like work, which means you do have to then be careful to draw that line between the rest of your life. We can talk all about that. I'm having 4 kids of my own. It's very busy, and you got to keep that line drawn. But spot on, Dr. Waldman. Um, Dr. Dawkins, I mean, we heard a little bit about your story, but what about your clinical practice and how are you managing and balancing all this? Are you all in? Did you quit too?
I did actually quit for a bit, but now I see patients 1 day a week now. So I think, Reed, to your point, you can't do it all, and so you've got to make a choice. But I do think working clinically is what also informs you and also makes you the better entrepreneur because you understand that experience. I mean, I think to me that's kind of our secret sauce is like I am the mother, right? I have experienced being the caregiver. I've experienced being a patient myself. I've been experienced being in the clinical workforce. And so that gives you a power that most others don't have. Like your lived experience is your superpower. So that's one point. But another thing that it made me think of is kind of the difference of being a clinician and being an entrepreneur. And I think it's a very different mindset. And it's something that I personally have had to kind of work against, I would say, because I think the path of medicine is very linear and you're on this very long set of tracks. And I think the longer you have that focus, you start to lose belief that you're able to do other things in the world. Do you know what I mean? And so I think trying something in entrepreneurship, which is not something I ever was interested in, it forces you to open your mind, expand your capabilities, and recognize that, like, wow, actually, we are all capable of everything. Like, if you think back to your high school self, you were probably in every club, doing every sport, doing every, right? And so you are all capable. And to recognize that again, I think is a big key of entrepreneurship.
So you can maybe use this one. I don't know if you'll like it, but this is what I use with a lot of my mentees. I call that deinstitutionalizing. I mean, you think exactly that's what we are in med school and residency. Oh, you're institutionalized to think only in one way, in the academic center way. And then you realize, oh, wait, you can literally do everything. You still have your hands, you still have your brain, you're capable of it all. That's an incredible story. For both of you, was there like a pivotal moment that like pushed you over the edge? I mean, like that's got to be really scary to think, hey, I've done all this training and now I'm actually going to, pull back from this and go full all in on the company. Was there like a pivotal moment or like any magic that happened or it just kind of flowed?
I think it just kind of flows where you're doing something, you're very interested in that thing, you're having a lot of fun. And for me, I've always enjoyed seeing patients, and I agree with Dr. Dawkins 100% that some of the superpower is that clinical experience. But all of a sudden, I noticed that while I was in clinic, all I was thinking about was the business, and that really had become, my fixation. And at that point, it becomes hard. And I think you start to see where, like, between patients, right? You're taking phone calls, you're doing other things, and it becomes a hard balance. But I think that there is no need all at once, like up front, to be like, I have an idea, I should quit my job. Like I would highly discourage everyone from doing that, and that is wholly unnecessary. I think over time you can phase out if needed, and I think many, many, many people continue to see patients while doing tremendous things.
Yeah, I think that's the
Some
blessing of being a dermatologist. We have that ability to kind of cut down on our hours. It's a real blessing. But it was the same for me. It just was a gradual realization then. And I'm a big believer in follow the joy. And so, like you said, if you can't stop thinking about this thing and realizing that, wait a minute, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do this. I need to do this thing, then you got to follow that.
All right, Master Yoda, please bestow upon us some great wisdom because I feel like you still do it all. So, I mean, how are you? What do you do in Chicago? You started some practice and now you're doing all like, how are you balancing this all? And
Not
how do you
not
plan to
well.
balance it all?
Yeah, not well and not elegantly. But I agree. I love what you said. You kind of brought up this idea and it made me think about filling your cup, right? So the things that really inspire you and get you going, that doesn't feel like work at all. And there's certain things that really drain you and deplete you. So you have to watch that ratio. And depending on what's happening, I think I've changed over the years. I mean, I've been in practice 21 years. So every few years, I think I make subtle changes to the kind of patients I see. I decided a few years ago to focus only on atopic dermatitis because I felt like that filled my cup and other things were kind of draining it. I was able to start my own practice, and that was a big deal, as hard as it is, but it's a wonderful kind of work that really yielded important fruits that allowed me to have more flexibility and time and control, which is what I really wanted. So I often say you got to pick. You ever see like in a mechanic shop, it's like pick two: fast, cheap, and good, right? That's you can only have two. You can't have all three. Maybe with clinical life, you can sort of have money. You can make a lot of money. You can have a lot of flexibility, or you can have a lot of fulfillment. You got to pick two again. You can't do all three. So I've chosen in my clinical life, I don't make any money. I'm medical derm. I don't see that many patients. They're all hard cases, but it's been really fulfilling. And I have flexibility to do this other stuff. So in some ways, I kind of feel like I can Robin Hood a little bit. I can do consulting and stuff and make money in the industry world. And then I can go see patients at my own pace and not feel pressure. And that's cool. And not everybody can do that. But I really encourage everybody to try to make their own way so that you're happy because burnout's huge. Patient care is hard and the world it's getting more and more complex. So there's all these changes. And I think you can get afraid. You can look at it and say, holy cow, medicine's going to be wiped out. AI is going to take all of our jobs. And you can kind of start cowering. Or you can say, this is an opportunity. There's tremendous opportunity. And that's what we see. And that's what's so exciting to see people with really with eagerness and excitement to go in and say, we got ambition. We can use this. We're going to change the world. We're going to actually fix things and do it the way we want. And I get to witness that every single day and be part of it.
And Peter, you mentioned the triangle of fast, cheap, and good. And I think that that kind of highlights a critical entrepreneurial lesson, which is your only power, right, as a small company is the ability to act with urgency and to act with high standards, right? The difference between a tiny company and, Eli Lilly or AbbVie or Pfizer is the speed and agility at which you can move. And whatever is a rational pace at which someone should do an activity is not acceptable, right, in the world of a startup or upstart or whatever you want to call it.
You're watching YouTube videos at 2x or 2.5x, podcasts are 3x.
I love it. I love it.
Well, so, I'm glad you brought that up, whether it's, the triangle of fast, good, and, affordable. There's a number of books, there's a number of philosophies on that. And I think there's one also bucket. I don't necessarily like the triangle. I think of them as buckets, because it's not like you have to fill one bucket entirely. And often what we end up doing is taking a little bit from one and moving it over to the other. And I'll remind everyone what I think is the most critical fourth bucket, which is your social life, your family life. And the truth is, some of the most successful people in the world, whether you think about Bezos or Elon, like they take away pretty much entirely from their family to go to those other buckets. So my only warning to every entrepreneur is really learn to balance all of that. And it's okay to take a little bit from one bucket, but you really want to be cautious in taking everything from that. um, and then the other thing I'll just mention, just because I was hearing it, is I sense this theme of like we're gradually getting into things. And I find that to be very common, particularly in our field, in the field of medicine, because we all mostly went into medicine because it's sort of this conservative, hey, we're going to be successful. We don't have mom and dad's trust fund or company that we're going to take over. So, like, we got to be a little conservative of it. And so there's always these little buildups. So, my advice to anyone that's younger or older or wherever they're at is that, again, it's going to take time, but just start building the tool blocks or the tools that you need now for later. Even when I was in med school, and you get the theme that everyone was doing things even way back in med school and residency, I audited the MBA courses at the University of Michigan because it was one of the top business schools in the country. Med school is, I don't want to say it was easy, but I had time off. And so, hey, I could audit these classes for free and get an MBA from Michigan. So why wouldn't you do that? So I've noticed that's a big theme. Um, Moving on, because you guys, with this whole triangle or buckets thing, let's talk about like mentorship. Have any of you guys had you any good mentors or read any good books or YouTube videos or TikToks, whatever they are nowadays? But has there been any important mentors in your journey? And what did they teach you, or what do you want to bestow upon us? Peter, I don't know if you want to go back around the other way as, leading the way with the
Sure.
theme of Yoda here.
I will say I do feel a little bit like I've had amazing mentors in clinical medicine, like just some of my most important and beloved teachers, and some of whom recently have passed, and I've been able to do memorial lectures, which has been incredible. So that part, I've been just so lucky. With this part, I feel like I've kind of been on my own, and it's been kind of interesting and very scary at times where I didn't know what to do. And in fact, I remember when I left academics, I made the big decision to leave academics. This is now more like 15, 16 years ago. I called one of my mentors and he was so frustrated with me and he couldn't believe it. He's like, "Wait, you're not going to stay in academic medicine?" And I was like, "Well, no, I think it's not the best fit for me over time." So I feel like I kind of walked out into the wild, but I'm really grateful that I did because I've learned a lot. And some of that's been the school of hard knocks and making bad decisions and learning the hard way. But I do feel like through that journey, I've really come to grow. But I think we're forging it. And hopefully we're going to be able to mentor the next generation to say, look, there are other paths outside of medicine. There are ways you can do this. And as you see, a huge array. It doesn't have to just be all or nothing. It can be these gradations.
Awesome. Any latest good books or anything like that that we should all know about?
There is a great book called The Business of Dermatology, and Kavita Marwala, I think, is one of the authors on it. It's a fabulous book. I wrote one of the little chapters, but I love the book overall. It's an excellent read.
Good. Wanted to make sure we could plug you, Peter. Okay. You can start the book club along with Skin Angels. All right. Dr. Wallman, Dr. Dawkins, what mentorship have you received? And don't forget, guys, to credit your mom and dad at some point here. Just gonna throw that out there for you.
Dr.
Well, I'll
Dawkins,
just
you want to
say,
go first?
eh, yeah, because this is actually a tough question for me because I think I've always craved mentorship, and there have been many people who have given that to me in smaller ways, but I never kind of found that person. But I think that this journey has also taught me that you have to be your own mentor because I think the whole point of entrepreneurship is to learn to trust yourself in the process. At least for me, anyway. I think I was plagued with self-doubt for the majority of my life, and so I think you have to recognize that it's not outside of yourself. The answers are actually on the inside. And so, actually, to look inside yourself and to have quiet is where you find what your next best step is. And so, yeah, there have been lots of books along the way that personally resonated for me. For me, I mean, this is probably going to sound completely opposite to what Reed is about to say, but for me, learning compassion for the self was actually really an important part of the journey for me and is what allowed trust. And so, anyways, I really love everything that this Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh has written, so highly recommend.
No, I love it. I love it. I think that's great. And I think you have to be good to yourself in these journeys. And it's very hard, especially when you're raising money. I think, most of what you face is rejection, right? It's like being an actor, right? Most of what you see is rejection. And I think you have to have some level of self-care there. I have been very fortunate in the mentorship, path in that when I was interviewing for private practice derm jobs, I had a practice owner say, "Oh, one of the other doc's husbands does exactly what you're doing. You two should meet." And this was at a time before I Googled everyone before I met them. And it was this guy, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm a psychiatrist by background." I'm like, "Oh, this is great." What I didn't realize is that he was the CEO of a company called Biohaven. They had a drug at the time called Nurtec ODT that they sold to Pfizer for $13 billion. And he ended up coming and mentoring us. I mean, it speaks to serendipity. And I had no idea. And we spent all this time together. We spent all this time together. And one day he says, "You're ready." And I said, "What am I ready for, Vlad?" And he goes, "It's time to meet the Snapple guy." And so he introduced me to the person who took Snapple from being a New York company to being national, named John Childs. And they led, our Series A. And ultimately, things went from there. But the one mentorship caution I will give is that there are many people who will be great mentors at certain stages in your journey who are not a great mentor over time, or who will be great mentors to certain aspects of your journey, who are not great mentors for others. And I will say that this comes true especially with fundraising, where everybody wants to be an armchair quarterback about raising money. But if you've never done it and you've never done it at a high level, then a lot of the advice you get is just not accurate.
That is very true. I can definitely concur that same thing goes with even leading a company. And, I'll look at even the ones here on the call. You may be the right person to get it from a $1 million company to a $10 million or 10 to 100 million, but you may not be the one that has the experience or the knowledge to bring that up to then that next level. And there is a whole process of that. Same way that there's just different mentors as well. Let's see here. Who else? I
Aaron,
guess
I
we
think
went around the
the one thing I'd add for that is that I do think the skills that behoove you early in your journey or at certain phases in your journey can be a real challenge. And there's like a famous quote from the guy who did, I think it's like the Oculus VR. And he said, at one point I realized I was the best VR engineer in the company, and that was a terrible thing. And I think that the same thing, at one point I was like, I am the best at clinical operations in the company. And that was a really bad thing. And so I think that, you really have to be okay over time as the business scales, the things that you owned, things that, you were an expert in, you are no longer the right person for, and that the best people surround themselves with the best people and hire people who are just so much smarter, so much more talented. And I'm very fortunate to work with people that are just, truly exemplary. And it is amazing that yeah, there are many things where I'm like, I'm now the worst person in our business at this, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, I gotta totally agree with that. That some of my best advice from a well-known billionaire out there, his advice was it is okay to be number two. In fact, you want to be number two. Of course, his senior partner made 32 plus billion dollars, and he only made eight on that deal. And again, that was what he told me is it's okay to be number two, kind of like what you're saying, Reed. You don't want to be the number one person. I'm recently doing a real estate deal with a family friend, and again, he's in the billionaires, and he's always been the number two guy, and now he's leading this big purchase of several hundreds of millions of dollars, and the guy is 69 years old. So you can imagine, again, takes time, takes patience, and hey, I don't mind being number two. So Peter, you're my number one. Let me know what we're gonna do next, okay? With one of these skin angels ideas. All right, so what's one of the hardest things about being this physician or now totally entrepreneur that no one really warned you about? What don't you like about doing what you do right now? I know you didn't know you were going to get the tough interview questions, but what don't you like about this?
One thing
Who's
I'll
gonna
I'll
lead?
jump in and I'll say, because I think about this a lot. I love to write, so I write a lot of papers. I also do a lot of creative writing, and I feel like there's these two schedules that often clash. The maker's schedule, which for me, when I'm creating something, I really like a long block of time where no one will bug me and I can just think, and a manager's schedule. And that's a schedule that's often extremely granular, peppered with lots of little meetings, and my worlds frequently collide. So you'll have like an afternoon where you're like, I'm going to work on this project, I'm going to put together this figure, I'm going to do this proof. And then all of a sudden there's like a few meetings in there. And it's like, well, it's only an hour of meetings. Why can't you? What's wrong with you? Because you have to like change your entire mindset. You have to shift those gears. And I'm pretty flexible. I view myself, I'm proud of myself for being pretty quick, but it's really tough then because you have to hit reset again and get back into that creative space or get back in the flow.
All right, Dr. Dawkins, Dr. Waldman, what don't you like about being an entrepreneur and what you're doing? And no, you can't say you love everything.
Yeah,
Gotta
no.
give, no, 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 none of
I'm
those
like, we
answers.
need another hour. No,
Uh-huh.
it's so freaking hard. It's so hard. I would say it is the hardest thing I've ever done because we're just not, I'm not trained for this. Like I was not that person who was selling newspapers. Like was not interested in entrepreneurship at any point. So this is all new in so many ways. And but that's what's so awesome is because you realize like you can really learn every single part of this. But to all of your points, you have to recognize at what point is the time for you to be like, okay, there's someone much better that's going to do it faster, better, pass it off. Um, but yeah, I guess I have to echo what Peter said because that is the thing. There's so many meetings. Like fundraising is really, really challenging, especially in this environment. But you got to just carry on and like brush it off your shoulder. And next meeting, like keep going. So
Yeah,
Thank you for admitting all that. It's super tough.
I would
Mr.
say the
Waldman?
hardest thing to me is accountability in that, you have accountability to the people who you raise money from. And I think, this is something I see, especially with young entrepreneurs, is something they maybe don't realize is that like when you take someone's money, that is money that they earned for which they have an opportunity cost, for which you owe them, not necessarily a guarantee that you're going to return them money because this is high risk investing, but that you will do everything possible to return their money. And that when things aren't going well, and there is no company in which every day goes extremely well. When things aren't going well, you need to be able to look at yourself and say, I did what I told my shareholders I would do. I lived up to the promises I made, right? I didn't do a bunch of hype and say a bunch of things that, were hyperbolic to try and get money, right? That I executed on that. And then you have that same accountability to your employees. Like I think one of the craziest things is our first employee in the development organization has six kids. And this is like, I'm working part-time as a derm at the time. I'm making most of my money as a dermatologist at the time. And he's a PhD. This is his everything. And health insurance comes from this, right? Salary comes from this. And you recognize that like success for everyone around you or doing your personal best is everything. And I think that sense of accountability can be very challenging and that sense really lies with the CEO and is one of the things that can be very lonely about the job.
To say that's probably one of the hardest things about bringing a company public. And I know we could spend an hour as to your decision to even do that because everyone thinks, oh, that must be amazing. You're gonna raise this money, but actually, wait, no. Now you're not the in charge of the company anymore. You now have to report to the board and the shareholders,
Oh,
which
and I have not been in charge in a long time. I think anytime you do a venture deal in general, right, you give up ownership. And I would say that's my other big piece of advice. Don't worry about dilution, worry about creating value. Dilution is like one of these things that I think people who have not done equity financing get like very fixated on like, why are they taking 30% of my company? And it's like it doesn't matter.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
take the money that you need to create the value and then deliver the value for your shareholders.
Bingo. I love it. All right. So some other questions. Hey, Dr. Leo, ideas and companies that are pitched to your group. Tell us a little bit more about those because that's what some of the people have been, the audience has been asking. What are some of these ideas? Are they all coming from dermatologists? And some overall thoughts on some of the best next steps, either going to Skin Angels, are there other groups out there? Are there brokers? What advice do you guys all have
Thank you.
here?
Yes, so Skin Angels is kind of a play on words. The acronym stands for Strategic Knowledge and Investment Network, Skin. But we're all skin focused and dermatology space focused. However, some of the founders are not dermatologists. In fact, many are not. But we ideally will have at least a dermatology focus or skin related focus. And typically there are already dermatologists that are part of the group that are presenting to us or shown some amount of clinical connection. But that being said, yeah, we think we're pretty unique as far as we know, for what that's worth. There is no one else quite like us. So anybody who has a skin related concept or idea, come to us. You're never too early, right? Really, we're going to want to hear it. And you could be too late if we're really looking for kind of like Series A or earlier. If you're beyond that and you're needing hundreds of millions, we're not going to be able to help you very much. However, you could come and talk to us just to get the word out, to get feedback, and to potentially get advisors, because it's another thing. We're a rich pool of advisors. So we, like I say, everything from AI concepts to medical record systems to cosmetic appliances, one that detects if you're in a blood vessel when you're doing filler, to new drugs. I mean, so you name it. We've seen the gamut of these things. And then next steps really are once you build that group and you have some early funding and you have a group of people that support you, we often try to open doors. The N for skin is networking. So we're going to try to connect you with other people. And sometimes that's all you need to get the ball rolling. That little bit of initial momentum gets it moving.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm involved with a couple of different investor circles, and you may not need the hundreds of millions of dollars. You just need it's really as we will call it in the world of business or investing, entrepreneurship, it's smart equity. Maybe you're only contributing a small amount, $100,000. I know that's small in the investing world, but you're providing so much more value in your background and your knowledge and what you trained in. Um, Anyone else? I mean, with their ideas, did you go to a broker? I mean, did you I mean, Reed, I'm sure you could give us a little insight into how you even raised money. It sounded like you had somebody there that's done this before that kind of told you, hey, this is the way it works, or what was that like?
Yeah, so I mean, we've raised a little over $500 million at this point, and a lot of that started with dermatologists. The first 2 million came from derms, so like Skin Angels, but not Skin Angels. And then over time, we moved to institutional investors. And I will say, and you'll hear this if you listen to any of these guys speak, that the way to get to institutional money is that you have to network to these investors. They do not respond to cold emails. You need to build the relationships to get to these people. And I think that realistically though, everybody thinks raising money is cool. Raising money is not cool. What you do with the money is very cool. And the way in which you position yourself to raise money is by executing. And there are lots of people who talk about all of the things they've accomplished, but the question becomes, are the things they're talking about the fundamental value drivers in the business? So, for example, right, if my sister-in-law works at a company that sells, cleats that decrease your risk of a non-contact injury. right? Their key performance indicator is how many cleats are they selling, right? What's the uptake? What's the revenue? How is that growing quarter over quarter? So if they're telling me about, hey, we've got these new product lines, but they're not mentioning how their quarterly revenue is doing, right? Then that gives me a sign as to how the execution, how the focus is going in the business. And so again, I think raising money, you can definitely find people who mentor you. You definitely don't need a bank, right, until you're taking a company public. This is all done by you as the, CEO and the CFO do that together. But that realistically, the way to raise is to deliver value. And when you deliver objective value, people are excited to give you money. And I'm sure Peter would say that like he follows companies. I imagine there are many people he's met where initially they were like, we don't know. Can they pull off this idea? I'm not sure. Is this something that's a fit for us? And then the person comes back 6 months later and they're like, holy shit, you sold how many? Or, you progressed how far? And they're like, we need to get involved. Like they're rounding up the troops. I mean, Peter, is this a common experience for you, I imagine?
Absolutely. That tipping point. It's so cool to see it. Nobody believed, nobody believed. Nope. Now everybody wants in. Now it's like, oh my gosh, it's a sure thing. It's so cool to watch that moment.
Yeah, I'll highlight one thing that you mentioned, Reed. It was this idea of KPIs, and I think that's a understated. I mean, that's part of the secret sauce that one of my mentors was teaching me. And this is just the way the world works. And we made grape on it and on how that's how private equity works in medical practices. They're only looking at numbers, but the reality is that tells you everything about the health of a business. It doesn't matter if you're selling potatoes or you're, creating a new pill for something, or cleats is the example you gave. If it's a really good design, great. Is it selling? What is the KPI that really determines success? And once you develop and identify those few core KPIs, then I think you just drive very much towards those numbers. It's a very
And I,
disciplined way of doing things.
I think on that note, and I do a small amount of investing, and I ask every single person the same question, which is, what did you do last quarter? What are you doing next quarter? And what are you doing this year? And if someone cannot tell you like two or three things that are the key drivers, like,
Yeah.
hey, we're really focused on scaling our revenue by building a field force and, getting into, retail chains and upping our DTC advertising. Like if someone cannot explain that, then right, they probably have a hobby, not a business,
For
right?
those of you guys who watch Shark Tank, you could see the next Mr. Wonderful. Just what'd you make before and what'd you making now? That's all I care about. You're dead to
Oh,
me,
it's
okay?
very
It's
real, right?
true.
Again, all of this is so hard. Like even the simplest idea, and there is nothing worse than someone who's like, if I just had someone who could make this app for me, it's like, all right, I don't even know what to
Yeah.
tell you about that. All of this is very difficult, and you have to have a vision and you have to convince people, right? The job of the CEO is to convince people to believe in that vision, because ultimately you will need other excellent people to help execute on that vision. And if it's not clear, it won't happen.
All right, Dr. Dawkins, there's a question out here for you. So, what do you recommend dermatology residents to do in getting involved in entrepreneurship during residency? I mean, no better person than the one who literally did it
Well, I need to
during that
clarify
time.
that I did not start during residency. I was just in practice for 6 years, head down.
CL.
But the seed happened while I was in residency. It was actually, I'm just going to be very transparent with you all. It was in a moment of burnout where I was like, something's got to change. And then I was talking to a friend in anesthesia and I said, you know what, you need to invent something. And then I told her the whole idea for Thimble. And she said, that's actually a good idea. I was like, you want to do it with me? And she said, no. But yeah, so that's the actual origin story. But it's tough. I think residency programs, I mean, there are probably other folks who could speak to this better, but I think there's been a shift. I think we're realizing that it's not just academics. And so I think residency programs, I hope anyway, are opening up the doors. I think getting involved in Skin Angels early is probably a really smart thing to do because you're going to be, I have learned so much from being a part of Skin Angels. You hear about different companies, you hear how to pitch, you have the opportunity to potentially advise early. I mean, I think that's probably the easiest way to get an entree.
Love it. Anyone else that want to add on that one? Or I got one more question, I think, to make sure we get to the end here. All right. Well, so I guess I would just add on to that. again, patience. Slowly build the skills, build those connections, build those ideas. You need all the planets to align. It's not going to happen just overnight. Slowly figure out what sort of things or skills and people you need to continue to grow. Speaking of which, one of the questions is okay, so you have this idea. How do you find people to help you? I mean, I know, Dr. Dawkins, you asked your friend and you got rejected. So, like, where are you finding, Dr. Waldman? You got people that are working for you. You've got funding. How are you finding these people? How do you know they're good for the project? They're good for the company? And any sort of advice or guidance in that way.
Hiring is hard. I think that that is one of those skill sets that is just extremely, extremely challenging. And, I think that that's another thing that is networked. So like right now, for example, right, we're looking for a head of comms for the business. So I interviewed every person I know, or I emailed every person I know that's C-suite at a meaningfully successful pharmaceutical company. And I said, hey, we're looking for this head of comms. Here's the profile we're looking for. Do you know anyone? In that I really do think in general, it is best to hire people that you at least know somebody in common and someone can vouch. In that you know, there is nothing worse than a bad hire. And Aaron, I'm sure you fired people before. It is brutal and it's really can be culturally challenging in the business, especially early on. And it's certainly time consuming, especially depending the state that you're in. And some people are just not a fit. Working in a startup is not for everyone. And I guess the last thing I'll say here is that I end every interview the exact same way, which is I tell people, these are the reasons you should not take this job. Like this job is actively a bad job because it is actively terrible to work in a small company, right? You will work way harder. You will probably get paid less. Our benefits are actually very good. That is like the one thing we do very well. But there are a lot of reasons why it's harder. And in a small company, there's visibility from the executives. And so there is no hiding, right? If you're at, Pfizer and there's 100,000 employees, you can hide. There is no
Yeah.
hiding in a 30-person company. And so I think it is important that as people look at joining, especially if they join from an environment that is not at all similar to the environment you're in, that they come in eyes wide open, knowing like, hey, this is a great idea. We might run out of money. Hey, I'm going to expect you to pick up the phone at night, on the weekend, whenever I want you to pick up the phone. Hey, our expectations, Pfizer, they wanted you to meet with 50 people. I want you to meet with 250 people a month. Like it's a very different, type of expectation set. And there are some people who they're like, I live for this. I will do this. That sounds like fun. I'm so bored in my job. And then there are people who are like, no, I'm good. And you want the people to say, no, I'm good. Because if they come and work for you and they don't want to do that, they are not a fit. It will be a disaster and you will fire them.
Spoken like a early company, as you're saying. Yes, I can already what you're saying resonates. Everyone's going to work hard, but if they're rowing in the same direction, it's going to do very well. Um, Peter, any thoughts on finding all? I mean, you just stand up there like an angel and cherry pick only the best and brightest. How are you finding good people?
I think it is challenging. At the end of the day, I always say what I'm betting on, what I'm investing in is the people. The people are the ones who can take a crappy idea, turn the whole thing around and make it sing. And with the wrong people, even the best idea, they can drive it into the ground, right? So it's always it's always on the people. And how do you find them? I think you use those skills. You use the friends you made growing up, the people that have mentored you, the connections you have in your life. They teach you what to look for. They give you a sense of who resonates. And you see someone who's truly focused on it, who's truly thought through it. And I've gone into some pitches where I'm kind of like, I look at the deck, I'm like, I don't know, this doesn't sound that good. And by the end, I'm on the edge of my seat thinking, this person is compelling. They really sold me. This is amazing. And I feel like, hey, if it's going to work for me, maybe I'm easy, but I love it. I think this is going to work for other people too. This idea has real legs. And some of that, again, I continue to learn and grow. And that's why it's so interesting to me because I don't know where it's going to go. There is this question. One of the questions that came up I saw in the Q&A, I was zipping through. I know we're close to the end of time, but it was how do companies fail? Because, right, I often think there's often one way to win, sort of, but there are a million ways to fail. And I feel like we could have a whole meeting on just how you can fail because there's so many points where the best intentions can fall apart.
Hey man. All right. Well, I see Kim's on, so I think we're getting the hook. We're getting close to the after hour. So Normally I'd toast with a nice glass of wine here at the end, but first of all, thank you to everyone here. I know I really enjoyed just hearing your stories and picking your brain and understanding the inner workings a whole lot more. And I know our audience definitely enjoyed it. And I have a feeling we're all going to be invited back at some point very soon. If not, we'll be partying at the AED all together. Working on all those schmoozing and connections that we've heard is very important, and selling our ideas and going to see Peter and his crew to talk about, getting some funding, and Reed raising a whole bunch, and Dr. Dawkins actually, creating this idea just out of, her own issues. It's kind of amazing what you guys have all done. So thank you for taking your time, spending an hour tonight with us. And Kim, I'll leave it to you if you have anything else final to say or what we have to conclude with.
Okay, I want to thank everybody that attended, and I want to thank you guys for sharing, your time and your expertise, and really seeing how passionate you all are. I'm sure that really resonated very well with the audience. And I think on the next one we should give away some of the Business of Dermatology books. I think that's gonna be our plan. Thank you, and I guess I'll see you guys all at AED. I'll have this live probably in a couple of days. I'll share it with all of you guys, so you can share it with your networks too, because I'm sure people will want to watch this at a later time too. Thank you. This was wonderful.
Thanks, Kim.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.